November 1871, Cleveland, Ohio. There were around 25 guys with oil refineries bigger than John D. Rockefeller's. Massive structures, more employees, better connections with the railroads. They swore they owned the game. They had been in the oil business longer, they had more capacity, and they were convinced Rockefeller was just another player trying to keep up. 4 months later, March 1872, 22 of those competitors were either bankrupt or had sold everything to Rockefeller. In 90 days, he swallowed the market whole. Historians would later call it the Cleveland Massacre. And the reason is brutal. It wasn't luck. It wasn't technology. It wasn't because his oil was better or his equipment was newer. It was how he handled cash. While his rivals guessed where their money was going, Rockefeller knew the exact location of every single penny. While they leveraged themselves up to their necks waiting for banks to approve loans, Rockefeller had liquid cash in hand ready to strike the moment opportunity appeared. While they built mansions to show off, he bought assets that generated more cash. The difference wasn't talent. It was a cash operating system that his competitors either ignored or refused to believe mattered until it was too late. If you want to stop pretending you understand money and actually learn how this machine works, subscribe right now. Drop a comment with what city you're watching from. Turn on notifications, because this isn't stage theory or motivational fluff. This is the actual blueprint that built the largest fortune in American history. And it works today exactly the same way it worked in 1872. What comes next will change how you see every dollar that touches your hands. Rule number 1. Total cash visibility prevents invisible leaks. Rockefeller learned this at 16 years old. He worked as an assistant bookkeeper in Cleveland and started keeping a small red notebook he called Ledger A. The kid wrote down every single penny he earned and every single penny he spent. Not approximately, not rounded to the nearest dollar, every cent. When he made $1 a day, he tracked it. When he gave 5 cents to charity, he wrote it down. When he spent money on food or lodging, it went into the ledger. He kept this habit for the rest of his life. Even when he became one of the richest men on the planet, he still knew where every dollar went. His competitors thought this was a disease, maybe even an obsession. They had a rough idea of what they were spending. They knew they were making money. They figured things were fine, and they assumed the details would take care of themselves. That assumption destroyed them. But here's where Rockefeller's obsession turned into a weapon. When you don't know exactly where your cash is going, you bleed money invisibly. You think you're profitable, but 30% of your revenue is disappearing into inefficiencies you never even notice. You're paying more than you should for supplies because you didn't track the pattern and catch the overcharge. You're losing money on delays because you didn't see the bottleneck forming in your process. You're getting billed twice for the same service, and you don't catch it because you're not looking at the details with precision. Rockefeller's refineries were obsessively efficient, not because he had better equipment than everyone else, but because he knew the cost of everything down to the drop. And I mean literally down to the drop. Here's a story that shows you how far Rockefeller took this principle. One day he was doing an inspection tour at a Standard Oil plant in New York City that manufactured 5-gallon cans of kerosene for export. He watched a machine that soldered the lids onto the cans. He asked the plant manager, "How many drops of solder do you use on each can?" The manager said 40 drops. Rockefeller looked at him and asked, "Have you ever tried 38? The manager admitted he hadn't, so Rockefeller told him to test it. They tried 38 drops and a small percentage of the cans leaked. But when they tried 39 drops, none of them leaked. Rockefeller made 39 drops the new standard across every plant. Now here's why this matters. That one drop of solder saved the company $2,500 in the first year. That's about $100,000 in today's money. But the export business kept growing. It doubled, then quadrupled, then became immensely larger. That single drop of savings, multiplied across millions of cans over decades, ended up saving Standard Oil hundreds of thousands of dollars. One drop. His competitors would have never even thought to ask the question. They would have assumed 40 drops was fine because that's how it had always been done. Rockefeller assumed nothing. He measured everything, tested everything, and optimized everything. That's what cash visibility does. It turns small details into massive competitive advantages. His peers thought he was being petty. Why would a man worth millions care about a one-drop difference in solder? But Rockefeller understood something they didn't. If you're losing one drop on one can, you're losing 1,000 drops on 1,000 cans. If you're losing 5 cents on one invoice, you're losing $500 on 10,000 invoices. Inefficiency scales. If you don't catch it at the penny level, it becomes a fortune-level leak that silently drains your margins, while you convince yourself you're doing well. His competitors didn't track at that level of detail, so they never saw the cumulative loss eating them alive. They only felt the pressure and blamed the market, the banks, or bad luck. Rockefeller saw it, measured it, fixed it, and kept the money they were giving away without even realizing it. He turned precision with numbers into a weapon as powerful as any refinery. Now let's bring this into your world right now. If you applied this exact rule starting today, here's what it would look like. You need to track every single dollar that comes in and every single dollar that goes out for 30 days minimum. Not with a rough budget where you estimate categories. Not with mental math. You write it down the moment the transaction happens, or you use an app that forces you to categorize it in real time. And here's what you're going to discover, and it's going to be uncomfortable. You're losing way more than you think to subscriptions you forgot about, fees you didn't notice, purchases that felt small in the moment but add up to hundreds every month. Most people guess they spend around $2,000 a month and then discover they actually spend $2,700. That $700 gap is invisible until you make it visible. Rockefeller didn't get rich because he made more money than his competitors in the beginning. He got rich because he kept more of what he made by knowing exactly where it went and plugging the leaks before they sank him. Here's your 7-day challenge. For the next week, track every transaction. Coffee, parking, online subscription, grocery run, everything. At the end of 7 days, categorize your spending and look for patterns. Where are your drops of solder? What are you paying for out of habit that you don't actually need or use? What vendor is overcharging you by a few dollars that you never noticed? Find your leak, plug it, redirect that money into something that matters. That's rule 1. The second rule is what made Rockefeller's rivals hate him most. And to understand why it worked, you need to see what happened in September of 1873. A major banking firm called J. Cook & Company collapsed. They had overextended themselves in railroad investments and couldn't cover their obligations. Within days, panic spread like fire. Other banks started failing. The New York Stock Exchange shut down for 10 days straight. By the end of that year, 55 of the nation's railroads had failed, and another 60 went bankrupt within 12 months. 18,000 businesses collapsed between 1873 and 1875. It was a financial massacre. Unemployment in New York hit 25%. Rockefeller's competitors, the ones who were still standing after the Cleveland Massacre of 1872, were now facing a crisis they couldn't survive. Most of them were running on debt. They had borrowed to expand, borrowed to buy equipment, borrowed to cover payroll. When the credit markets froze and banks stopped lending, they had no way to keep operating. They were suffocating, and that's when Rockefeller made his move. Because Rockefeller had been following the second rule religiously. Cash reserves create crisis leverage. While everyone else was spending everything they made or leveraging themselves to grow faster, Rockefeller kept massive cash reserves. He didn't just have enough to operate. He had what he called his war chest, a pile of liquid capital that he could deploy instantly when opportunity appeared. During the Panic of 1873, when his competitors were begging banks for loans that didn't exist anymore, Rockefeller had dry powder. And he used it to buy their refineries, their transportation networks, their pipelines, for pennies on the dollar. They were desperate to sell because they were drowning in debt and couldn't make payroll. He was calm and calculating because he had cash. The 6-year depression that followed didn't just destroy them. It made him richer. Standard Oil didn't just survive. It dominated. And Rockefeller later said it was entirely because of the company's conservative financial policy. and unparalleled access to cash reserves. Think about what that means. While the entire economy was collapsing, while businesses were failing by the thousands, while unemployment was hitting depression levels, Rockefeller was buying assets at liquidation prices. His competitors had to sell or die. He got to choose what to buy and set the terms. That's not luck. That's the power of cash reserves. Cash doesn't just protect you during crisis. It gives you the ability to profit from other people's panic. It turns you from a victim into a predator. Here's the modern translation, and this is where most people completely miss the opportunity. You need to build what I'm calling an opportunity fund. This is not your emergency fund. Your emergency fund is for when your car breaks down or you lose your job. Your opportunity fund is for when the market crashes, when real estate prices drop, when everyone else is panicking and selling assets at a discount because they're forced to liquidate. Right now, in January 2026, most people have zero cash reserves beyond maybe a month or two of expenses. When the next recession hits, and it will, they'll be forced to sell investments at the worst possible time just to stay afloat. But if you have cash reserves, you become Rockefeller in 1873. You get to buy when everyone else has to sell. Look at what happened in 2008. The people with cash reserves bought real estate at 30 to 50% discounts and made fortunes over the next decade. The people without reserves lost their homes. Look at March 2020 when COVID crashed the market. The people with cash bought stocks at a 40% discount and doubled their money in 18 months. The people without cash panic sold at the bottom and locked in losses. This is how generational wealth actually transfers. It doesn't transfer because the rich are smarter or work harder. It transfers because the rich have liquidity during crisis and the broke have desperation. Here's your action plan for Rule 2. Set a target for your opportunity fund. Start with 3 months of expenses if you're employed, 6 months if you're self-employed. Then build it even bigger. $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. Whatever number gives you the ability to act when everyone else is frozen in fear. Start building it this month, even if it's just $50 at a time. Protect it like Rockefeller protected his war chest. Don't touch it for vacations or upgrades or anything that isn't a genuine crisis or a genuine opportunity. When the next crisis comes, and it always does, you won't be the one selling. You'll be the one buying. That's Rule 2. Now the third rule is the one that separates people who make money from people who keep and multiply money. And Rockefeller's competitors absolutely hated this one because it exposed them. Here's the scene. By the late 1870s, Rockefeller was already incredibly wealthy. He could have afforded any mansion on Euclid Avenue in Cleveland, which was known as Millionaire's Row. He could have built a castle, thrown lavish parties, bought yachts, done everything the other robber barons were doing to show the world they had arrived. Instead, he deliberately chose a modest house. He wore monogrammed cufflinks but paper vests. His homes were comfortable but always smaller and simpler than what his fellow industrialists were building. He designed them to please his family, not to impress strangers. Meanwhile, his competitors were building monuments to themselves. Massive estates, extravagant parties, everything they could buy to signal status. And Rockefeller watched them pour their profits into symbols that generated zero return. He did the opposite. The third rule is this: cash reinvestment beats cash display. Every dollar that Rockefeller made from Standard Oil that didn't go into reserves got reinvested into assets that generated more cash. He bought more refineries, more pipelines, more railroad cars, more transportation infrastructure. He systematically acquired prime real estate across America. He bought controlling interests in major banks. And here's the brutal kicker. When Standard Oil was broken up by the Supreme Court in 1911, his personal wealth wasn't just unharmed, it actually increased because he had diversified his cash into permanent external assets that kept compounding. His competitors spent their money on things that depreciated the moment they bought them. He spent his money on things that appreciated and generated cash flow year after year. That's the difference between looking rich and being rich. Let me show you the math on why this matters. Let's say you have $10,000 in extra income this year. You can either spend it on a luxury purchase that impresses people for a few months, or you can invest it in an index fund averaging 10% annual return. If you invest it and reinvest the gains, in 10 years, that $10,000 becomes almost $26,000. In 20 years, it becomes $67,000. In 30 years, it becomes over $170,000. That's compound interest. Now multiply that behavior across every surplus dollar for an entire lifetime, and you start to see how Rockefeller built $400 billion in adjusted wealth. He wasn't spending on flex. He was spending on assets that compounded. His wealth lasted because he didn't just pile up cash like a dragon sitting on a hoard. He turned it into a machine that generated more cash across generations, deliberately building something that would keep working long after he was gone. Real estate that appreciated slowly, but relentlessly. Businesses that paid dividends year after year after year. Investments that compounded quietly in the background while other families chased the next visible status trophy and burned through their fortunes in 2 generations. He treated every surplus dollar as a seed, not a trophy. Most of the robber barons from that era are forgotten today because their fortunes disappeared as quickly as they appeared. They spent it, their kids spent it, and within 2 generations it was gone, dissolved into parties and mansions and reputation projects that produced no lasting cash flow. Rockefeller's fortune is still here. Here's how you apply this rule starting right now. You have a choice with every dollar you make after your basic needs are covered. You can either spend it on things that make you look successful, or you can reinvest it into things that make you actually successful. The culture right now is screaming at you to do the first one. Buy the car that shows you've made it. Wear the watch that signals status. Take the vacation that gets the Instagram engagement. And listen, there's nothing morally wrong with any of that. But understand the trade you're making. You're choosing display over compounding. You're choosing to look rich today instead of being rich tomorrow. Rockefeller chose compounding over display. And that's why his wealth outlasted everyone who was richer than him at the start. The modern version of reinvestment isn't complicated. It means you take the profit from your business or your salary increase or your bonus and you put it into assets. Index funds that pay dividends. Real estate that generates rental income. A side business that creates another income stream. Anything that generates return instead of just sitting in your driveway losing value. It means you live below your means even when your means expand, and you redirect the difference into things that compound. Most people increase their lifestyle the exact moment their income increases. They get a raise and immediately upgrade their car or their apartment. Rockefeller increased his assets and kept his lifestyle modest. That's the rule. Don't just make money. Turn money into assets that make more money, and then protect the habit of reinvesting so that compounding has decades to work in your favor. Here's your action step for Rule 3. The next time you get a bonus, a tax refund, a profit distribution, anything that feels like extra money, do not spend it on consumption. Take at least 50% of it and put it into an asset. Open a brokerage account if you don't have one and buy an index fund. Put a down payment on a rental property if you have enough. Invest in a business or a skill that will generate future income. Track what happens to that money over the next 12 months. Watch it grow while the consumption purchases your friends made have already lost their value. That's how you build the habit of reinvestment. Now here's what makes all 3 rules work together as a system, and this is critical. They're not separate strategies. They're one integrated loop. Cash visibility shows you where the leaks are so you can plug them and redirect that money into reserves. Cash reserves give you the leverage to act when crisis creates opportunity and everyone else is desperate. And cash reinvestment turns those opportunities into compounding assets that generate more cash, which builds bigger reserves, which gives you more leverage for the next cycle. It's a loop that feeds itself and grows exponentially over time. Rockefeller's competitors were trapped in a different loop. They didn't track their spending, so they bled cash invisibly. They spent everything they made or borrowed to grow faster, so they had no reserves when crisis hit. They went into debt to survive, which made them desperate sellers. And they spent their profits on status symbols, which generated zero return and left them with nothing when the market turned. That loop destroyed them, while Rockefeller's loop built $400 billion in adjusted wealth. Let me show you how brutal this system was in practice. In early 1872, during the Cleveland Massacre, Rockefeller used his cash reserves to offer his competitors a simple deal. Sell to me now and get cash immediately, or go bankrupt later when you can't compete. Most of them took the cash because they knew he was right. The ones who refused to sell went bankrupt anyway during the Panic of 1873, and Rockefeller bought their assets for even less at the liquidation auctions. That's what cash reserves let you do. You can move faster than competitors running on debt. You can offer better terms because you're not waiting for bank approvals. You can outlast anyone who's operating on leverage and hope. Cash in hand lets you dictate the rules of the game, and that obsession with catching every inefficiency, it compounded into an insurmountable advantage. While his competitors were losing money on waste they never even measured, Rockefeller was turning cost-cutting into an art form. The solder drop story isn't the only example. He optimized every single process in his refineries. He tracked barrel costs, transportation costs, labor costs, everything. If there was a way to do something cheaper without sacrificing quality, he found it. That discipline gave him profit margins his competitors couldn't match, which gave him more cash to reinvest, which let him buy better equipment and scale faster, which lowered his costs even more. It was a compounding advantage that started with asking one simple question. Have you ever tried 38 drops? So here's where you are right now. You know the exact 3-rule cash operating system that Rockefeller used to go from competing with 26 refiners in Cleveland to controlling 90% of America's oil refining capacity. You know that cash visibility prevents invisible leaks that destroy profit before you ever see it. You know that cash reserves create leverage during crisis, when everyone else is desperate and forced to sell. You know that cash reinvestment into assets beats cash display every single time, even when the display gets more likes in the short term. The only question left is whether you'll act on it this week, or let it become another piece of inspiration you consume and forget. Pick one rule, just one. If you choose visibility, start tracking every single dollar today, not tomorrow, today. Do it for 30 days and see where your drops of solder are, even if what you find makes you uncomfortable. If you choose reserves, set a specific target number for your opportunity fund and start building it this month, even if it's just $50 at a time that you refuse to touch unless a real opportunity or crisis appears. If you choose reinvestment, take the next chunk of profit or bonus you get and put it into an asset instead of an experience, into something that pays you instead of something that just impresses people who don't pay your bills. Track it for 30 days. Watch how your mindset shifts when you start acting like a capital allocator instead of just a consumer. Then come back and tell us what changed. Because here's the truth that Rockefeller proved and that most people never learn. Wealth isn't built by people who know the most. It's built by people who apply what they know, while everyone else is still talking about it and waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. The system is in front of you. Visibility to stop the bleeding. Reserves to exploit the market's desperation. Reinvestment to multiply and compound. That's the blueprint. Comment right now with which rule you're starting with: visibility, reserves, or reinvestment. Say it publicly. Commit to it. Let's see who's actually serious about building instead of just watching. If you're the kind of person who actually applies what you learn instead of just collecting information, make sure you're subscribed, because this channel exists for people who are done playing broke and ready to operate like builders. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one, because each video adds another piece to the wealth system you're creating. This is how it works. This is how Rockefeller did it. Now go do it yourself.